Of you turn to the side that you didn't came with. But I mean, you don't have any choices. But please look at each other, next to each other, the one that you even didn't count with each other. Would you please look at each other's face? Look. Look at that eyes. Look at these eyes, Jamshid. Look. Look at him. Isn't that beautiful smile? What I want to get out of this one, I'm hoping that I conclude. And what I conclude, I'm hoping you take it with. Only real eyes realizes the real light. This is the vignette of massacre of opposition in Iran, and this is really happened. But they can hear me, am I right? I have a disclaimer, and that is the accuracy of the account of the number of the deaths always have been disputed among prisoners. But the mass murder committed by Iranian Republic, Islamic Republic of Iran, is the fact. They were converted from the Iranian calendars to the Western calendars. Therefore, they do not reflect accurate date. However, the conditions are completely accurate. If I'm using any word of revolution in this presentation, please make sure that I do not imply there is an economical and social changes that happen in Iran simply by replacing the monarch. Some pictures may not be suitable for some. I'm sorry about that. And I'm apologizing to say I cannot say my history in 20 minutes. So don't criticize me of saying that you didn't say that, you didn't say that. Give me 200 minutes, I will cover the whole thing. Martin Numer says, when the Nazi came for the communists, I did not speak out as I was not a communist. When they locked up the Social Democrat, I did not speak out. I was not a Social Democrat. When they came for the trade unionists, I did not speak out as I was not a trade unionist. When they came for the Jews, I did not speak out as I was not a Jew. Guess what? When they came for me, there was no one left to speak out. I think that there were many discussions here as how the monarch left and how Khomeini came. I'm not going to get into it, but the day before yesterday, two of my friends, Bahram and Torab, they talked about it, and Torab today had a little touch on that one, so I'm not going to go through that one. I think that I kind of completely agree with them. Khomeini, like everybody in the world, like Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, and everybody else, when they come to the before the power, said exactly the same thing. Marxists are free to express their opinion. If I make a mistake, people should warn me. Islamic regime is not a dictatorship. Monarch is against of human rights. Papers or print must write what people want. Water, gas, and utility will be free of charge. All political groups should be uniting, and mullahs should not be president. As many of you may know, 4 out of the 6 presidents in Iran from 1981, they're all mullahs. Please pay attention to what they said also. There is no forced hijab, nor any torture will be, any torture will be forbidden in Iran. But what happened after that, they started to execute the Pahlavis upper echelon on February of 1979. 2,000 members of Shah's regime were executed in 1979 alone by Khalkhali's own admission on the 1919 memoir. Khalkhali said, if they were guilty, they will go to hell, and if they were innocent, they will go to heaven. And he said, I would do exactly the same again. And as Nushin was said, he is considered as a moderate. And I'm so sorry, and I'm so sorry, and I'm so upset that I see her daughter going to talk in these social forums, without saying what her father did is condemned. So please pay attention what Nushin said. Many of them today, they are alive. They are moderate people. And Khalkhali was one of those. In March of 1978, in a Women's International Day, and as you have seen in Masoud's films, they came out and they were working against what we actually had heard before they come. He said there is no forced hijab. I wasn't a woman. I didn't come to speak out. I wasn't monarch. I did not speak out either. They started the massacre of Arabs in Khuzestan in the late April, until the May of 1979. Arabs in Khuzestan began protesting against the discrimination. But mass gunmen killed about 100 Arabs in Khorramshahr. I wasn't Arab. I was not Arab. In Turkmen Sahara, they attacked the first time in March of 1979, and second was in February of 80s. And Turkmen Sahara, I will show you in the picture later on, but Turkmen, they actually had a big history of, I'm not going to that, began to resolve the land issue in Turkmen Sahara, and land confiscated by Pahlavi general was given back to the ethnic Turkmen groups. But more than 100 Turkmen ethnic people, mostly unarmed women and children and elders, they were hidden in their house with murder. And guess who killed them? Khalkhali. He admitted by himself on October 22nd in 1987, I killed 4 of their leaders. This is one of their leaders. And where was that person? Where those 4 found? It was in the ditch outside of the city. You call him moderate. You invite her daughter over here talking in the social forum. You tell me, am I mad? Yes. And of course, what happened, magazines and the print. There are 2 really structured in the society. One is the print and magazine, and the second thing is the university students. They actually started to talk about what's happening in the country. And by the way, in Iran, after that so-called revolution, 3 months after that, 200 new magazines print published daily and weekly. Just in 3 months, 200 of them. And not long after, Oyendegan was shut down. And also, there were 69 other papers like Kehan Azad, Peygam Emruz and Ahengar. They were all in Turkish publication. They were all banned. And Article 29, 30, and 31 established says offenses committed by the press shall be dealt with in a criminal court from 6 months to 2 years. You cannot talk anymore. Shut up. In Bandar Anzali, north of Iran, population 500,000. On October 23rd, 1979, the issue was a fishery, 17 deaths and 53 injured. One of the most devastating things in Iran was the Kurdistan, which was basically uprising in March of 1979. And Kurds, by all means, they have also the cultural issues and religious issues. But in 1979 of June, Khomeini called jihad against the Kurds. And about 100,000 people were killed in that course, and with 12 of them being political prisoners. And a speech on December 1797, Khomeini, who said in the beginning, before the revolution so-called, called the concept of ethnic minority contrary to Islamic doctrine. And 27th of 1979 in Sanandaj, Iran, 11 Kurdish prisoners were executed by firing squad, followed a 30-minute so-called trial under Shia leader, guess who? Khalkhali. And as you can see, the gentleman that is actually laying down, his name was Ahsan Nahid on stretcher. And among of those, there was Dr. Abul Qasim Rashvandi Sardari, who was executed because he was helping the wounded. None of the political people, they talk about Garna massacre. What's outstanding about Garna massacre is one of the most painful human tragedy of the Kurdistan wars. That innocent people of the village have been killed. On September 2nd, 1979, around 1 p.m., the forces under the commander of Mullah Asani launched an assault in the village of Garna using tanks and cannons. Based on the names and statistics available, 64 citizens, the government state says actually 46 people died. Do you know how big was? How big was the village? This is where they were. 80 households. Out of 80 households, they are actually killed so many. So what happened, the magazines are gone. Now the students are the one that is voices of the people. So what do? They come to close of the university. Guess what I did? I was there. No one was to speak. I am one of the students. They came to us. On May 4, 1980, Ahvaz University was attacked, the first one. Several students were arrested and murdered. On April 29 in 1980, they attacked and 300 students were hospitalized. Many were killed. And it's between June 5th and June 12th university, they shut down all the universities. 1/3 of the students and 2/3 of the teachers, around 20,000 were dismissed. These are the names of the people that I wrote in Farsi. But you should know, every one of them, they were the one who decided, I should get out of the university. The first one, Abdul Karim Surush, he's outside and he's talking about democracy. I want to have him to come and say, why did I get out of the university? I am a university professor here in the United States. I have no right to tell a student to go out. He is coming outside in the United States, in England and everywhere, and talk about democracy while he actually kicked me out of the university. And that's what I want you to realize. Realize the real lives. And only you can realize that. And of course, everybody knows about Iran and Iraq war. It lasted about 8 years. It was the first and only conflict in the history of warfare in which both forces actually used the ballistic missiles against each other. And I think Turab had a little bit touch on that, what happened, how they do that, what happened about the war. 1.5 million Iraqi soldiers and 600 Iranian soldiers were killed. 100,000 civilians were killed on the both sides, not including 50 to 100,000 civilians killed in the Kurdish genocides. Economic loss was 627 million for Iranian and 561 billion to Iraqis. And then Khomeini, who wanted to take the war, take it to Jerusalem and export his Islamic, whatever crap it is, to there, started drinking the calico poison. He said, I gave up, I defeated. Now, what it had to do with what happened on June 1981 is another subject that we can talk about it for hours and hours and come with some conclusion. But on that day, hundreds of political activists were arrested and hundreds of demonstrators were killed daily. Many arrestees were executed without their name or address known. If you look at the pictures is of the people that they don't know who they are. They printed in the papers and they said, do you know this person? Let their parents know that we already killed them. Come and get the body. The exact number of executees are unknown, but 20 to 30 pictures were posted in the daily paper in Tehran. It is said that it was about 100 to 150 a day. Because they didn't know some of them, they brought them out in the pictures, but about 20, 30. But the total, they are talking about 100, 150 just in Tehran. Every day, we prisoners heard around 100 of coup de grace. You may call it death blow in having prison. Every day. Every day I heard 100. We counted 89 today, 72 today. The next day it was 102. We hear bang, bang, bang. It's like an iron, and we have an expression. We said that it seemed like an iron falling on the ground. Just to give you a little bit concept of what we went through was a cell that it was about 36 square foot, meters. We were 70 of us. I was living and I was laying down when we were sleeping. My foot, my ankles, was actually touching the crotch of the other. So we were sleeping this way. I could not sleep on my back. We had to sleep on the side because it wasn't enough. That's how it was. And of course there is a whole story about what the condition of the cell was. In those days there were tortures, and of course it was torture. There are also almost 71 kind of torture used reported by political prisoners who were personally the victim of these brutal methods. I categorize them to physical, psychological, and sometimes both of them. I cannot name 71 of them, and I cannot come up with all of those. This is a picture that actually is not on those days, because on those days they did not do anything. We didn't have any. I will go through that one a little bit more. These are the pictures that I found about 10, 15 years ago. There was a gentleman, they lashed him. So I took the pictures and tell you what's happened. Solitary confinement, or as know we call them infaradi. You were in the room, alone, dark, nobody was there. Torturing a loved one in front of a prisoner. How do you like your daughter comes over there? And they beat you up in front of your daughter. How do you like to be beaten, your parents, while you are there? I have a friend, a dear friend, and he still is alive. He said, they beat my wife. I wish they would have beaten me. Mock executions. Starving infant to put pressure on the mothers. Crushing the prisoners. Sleep deprivation 24/7. We had so much noises in the hallways and everywhere that we couldn't sleep. Of course, this is not inside of the cell. Threatened to arrest the family members as hostage or hostage them. Blindfold. I was in 11 days blindfolded, 24/7, except in the toilet. Why is that psychological? Everything in my mind was going through hearing, crying, screaming, and yelling and beating. 11 days, night and day. Giving false information about the fate of the family members, confiscating of the properties and family, or threatening to do so. forcing prisoner to see horrifying scene. I have a case that actually somebody was talking about, that there was a garbage can and they had a broken body of the people inside. This is what we're going to do to you. I was in prison. Somebody came and said, where are you from? I told them where I'm from. I mean, which area, which neighborhood? And I said, I'm from. He said, do you know so-and-so? I pretended I don't know anybody. I said, no. He said, how could it possibly be? It's like you're active, political active in the neighborhood, you don't know him? And I pretended to be an idiot. I said, no, I don't know anything about it. He said, too bad. I said, why? He said, they took him for 3 days, beating him so much, they couldn't take anything out of him. I knew exactly who he was. And they wanted me. I think it was him. Sexual assault against prisoner, which was not confined to women either. This is again a picture that I found out in the internet. Again, this is about a couple years ago they came up, but this is what it really happened in prison where we were. If you look at your right side, he started to beat him with whatever he has in hand. They tried in the second upper. The prisoner, they tried to fight back, which we couldn't do that because they put us on the bed, put the hand and the foot. You couldn't move. They put something in your mouth, so we couldn't defend ourselves. And you could at the bottom part of that. That's why they try whatever they want to do. And this is what it ended up. This is not a real prison that we were in. But guess what? When this comes out, what is hidden? What is hidden? I have seen many of them. Beaten to death with cables. Cable is the most really, really vicious torture that they did on the foot. Cantilever torture, we call them kaponi. They put your hand in the back and they actually close it as much as you can. If you go your hand, you put your hand on, try to reach each other, you can't do that. What they did, they actually put you on the wall somehow that your toes were on the floor. And the other one also was hanging from the ceiling. Your foot was on the floor, I mean your toes reaches the floor and you were hanging for days. Electrical batons with electrical cables. And also something that Nushin was talking about, I call them cage, judgment, qiyamah. That was a box that it actually happened many, many years later, that they put you in a 2-1 by about 1 meter by Hajda wood, that it was actually you were there. Many people, they were there for month and month and month. Sleep deprivation was one of them. Beating with the wood or metal stick, resulting in a broken bone. Something that Turab had made mentions of that one, and Bahram, and the other one they talk about is Iran Gate. Why it's important is because on January 1986, Khomeini, who wanted to export the Islamic agenda to Israel, got the order from Reagan to sell 4,000 US-made anti-tank missiles. And in '86, McFarlane and Oliver North visited Iran, and you guys know about Iran Gate. And of course, CIA Director William Casey was talking about it, was going to talk about it, but unfortunately or fortunately, a day before, on December 15, before he goes to the Senate and talk about the U.S. involvement, Central CIAs were selling to arm, he got a seizure and he died. Execution of Iranian political prisoners, what they call them annihilation of the enemy of Islam, began on 31st June of 1988. Khomeini himself wrote what he wrote, and this is what I call him. This is what I can tell him. I do not call him Ayatollah, I call him the butcher of the history. But It started on July 31st. Everybody was trying to say why it happened, but to my understanding is on July 24th of the same year, trend of transferring prisoner to solitary was accelerated. And the day next, prisoners were given form to fill out. The execution began pursuant a fatwa issued by Khomeini immediately following Iran's announcement that it had agreed to cease fire in a devastating 8 years war in Iraq and Iran. And we do have 482 names, but it's actually, some people, they claim it has to be about 30,000. Guess what? Iranian regime never accepted or agreed and actually denied that it has been taking place. When they took the prisoners, there were two parts. Islamic one, Mujahideen, they asked them, are you willing to denounce former colleagues? Are you willing to denounce them in front of the camera? Are you willing to help us hunt them down? Will you name secret sympathizer? Will you identify phony repentant? Will you go to the war front and walk through enemy's minefield? Guess what? There wasn't any war. It's already gone. But they asked the question. From the leftists, they asked questions. Do you pray or read Quran? Do you believe in God? Are you Muslim? A couple of our friends who survived, they said I was trying to tell him, I am Armenian for God's sake. I've never prayed, I never Islam, I never had a Quran. And they said, it doesn't matter, you live in Iran, you have to be. Though they have actually been subjected to beating that they did a slash on them, lash them, and they had it, and they were going, my name is Andrea, or Andre. But it didn't matter. What makes the massacre of 1988 a genocide? There were prisoners that, despite having completed their sentences, were still incarcerated, then taken out and executed. There were prisoners that had not been sentenced to death, but were executed anyway. Political prisoners were called into face kangaroo court of 3 clerics, which right now, one of them is actually a minister of Iranian government, Mr. Rouhani. All trials were short, 5 to 10 minutes, 15 minutes, without a right to any defense. It's like they told you, do you believe? And you said, well, can I talk? No, shut up, just say, I'm not Muslim, it doesn't matter. So there is no way that they ask you the question that they wanted you to defend yourself. You should have said yes or no. The interrogation was not based on individual situation, but based on the certain pre-planned question. The massacre was planned after the end of Iran and Iraq war. And actually, to be honest with you, there are a whole history of that we call him Maysam Karasi, that we have it on our website if any Iranian wants to know, that is actually planned in 4 years, 3 years prior to. So there is many of us, we believe it actually was planned before. But this is also, we say, short before the MKO failed military attack on Iran called Forough Javidan in 1988. Not only is ignored, this is very important. Everybody who talks about human rights, where are you? Not only is ignored by the West, because of their complex relations with the Islamic Republic of Iran, but also the UN, I'm emphasizing, but also the UN and International Criminal Court, the Hague Court, have been silenced on the massacre of the last 2 decades. In my book, I am accusing my government, United States government. I'm accusing them. Never they denounced it. Those executed were buried in unmarked mass grave on the outskirts of Tehran. Also the other side. I don't know much about the other part of Tehran, so I apologize for that. The mass burial in Tehran was accidentally discovered by an Armenian priest who became curious as to why stray dogs kept digging there for the bones, because the mass grave location is close to the cemetery of Armenians. And that's how it was discovered. There is a whole subject that can go on. What happened to us, it's happening today in a different way. As Masood was talking about stoning a woman, so and so they were talking about it. I cannot touch about it, but I really, really appreciate, look at that woman over there. That is her brother. Her brother and his wife. They had a baby. The baby went to jail. They don't know what happened to that kid. Don't you want to know? The kid's brother. The brother's kid. That girl, that lady over there, the picture is his brother, her brother. The brother and his wife, they were murdered in prison, but they had a baby. What is that baby?
That's a question.
What I talked about it is what happened in Iran, to the north, to the west, to the south, everywhere that it happened. I was hoping that I could touch to tell you that I have the cycles that it went on. So what am I trying to get out of that? Honest with you, I'm not going to go murder the person who hurt me. I'm not here to kill them. I'm not here to do anything with them. But I want you to get out of it. When there is injustice, inequality, and oppression, stand up and fight. Remember, if you do not stand up for the others, there would be no one. There would be no one to stand up for you. Let's unite, stand up, and defend freedom of justice, what I call socialism.
Thank you very much, Ali. And now Mr. Nژاد talks about collective trauma. Thank you.
Following wonderful presentations by Turab, by Nushin, by Ali, I wish I could speak about something else, because I feel that all of you are traumatized. We need a dance, we need a music, a beautiful song, because it's a part of human nature. But it is my unpleasant duty to speak about a similar subject, collective trauma. The first thing I want to share with you is my experience as a trauma counselor with the Canadian Center for Victims of Torture. I have been working there for the last 23 years, and I have seen plenty of survivors of torture, war, genocide, and crimes against humanity, possibly from 100 countries, specifically from Iran. I want to share some of my reflections with you, and I work also as a policy analyst and researcher with the center, and a little bit outcome of my research about the subject. First, trauma. What is trauma? Trauma could be physical, could be emotional, and could be psychological. Suddenly, you get a blow. That blow injures you, maybe physically, emotionally, or psychologically. That is sudden, unexpected, and it is beyond the normal range of a human person to tolerate. That is trauma. And the problem with trauma, dilemma of trauma is that it doesn't go away. After effects of trauma, what we call it PTSD, remains for the rest of one's life. It has 3 symptoms. One is intrusion. Intrusion means flashbacks. The memory comes to your mind as if it is happening today, many times, years after the initial trauma. We have avoidance. You avoid places and people that remind you of your trauma, and sometimes you avoid your family members, and occasionally you avoid yourself. It's horrible. And the third one is hyperarousal. You have memory loss. You have nightmares, frequent nightmares. You suffer from lack of sleep. We call it insomnia. And all these symptoms. That is called post-traumatic stress disorder. It could go away if you can train yourself, and if you are powerful enough internally. It might lead to paranoia. It might also stay with you, and you need different levels of support. And according to our experience at the center, 5% of our clients do very well. They have converted the experience of their torture and trauma into something very productive. People like Ali, people like Nushin, and many of you. So that is human faculty and human capacity. Some 5% become paranoid. I like to share experience of one of my clients. They tortured him and he resisted torture. Finally, they brought his mother, and they said, if you don't give us information, we will kill your mother. Then mother said, my son, don't give them any information. Let them murder me. And they did it. My client has become paranoid. And our challenge is that to stabilize his condition. There is no cure for him. And now let me turn to collective trauma. What happens if everybody is traumatized? The whole society going through a trauma. And trauma reproduces itself on a daily level. Is there any cure for that? Who can help another person? So it's extremely difficult, this experience of collective trauma. Let me share some historical examples of collective trauma. In 12th century BC, Benjaminites, a 12th tribe of Jewish people, they were exterminated. All of them were killed by other Jewish tribes. So there is no name of them in the history. And I tell you one thing, that was not only mass physical annihilation that killed them. It was self-denial also as after effect of collective trauma. When you deny yourself and you try to even assimilate in another tribe, or you forget about your identity. We have other very sad and tragic examples. 6th century BC, Jewish people were sent to exile, and then Cyrus from Iran emancipated them, sent them back to Jerusalem, and in 17th century AD, Jerusalem temple was destroyed, and Jewish people started scattering all over the world. They call it diaspora, and they went through a historical trauma. And during Crusades also, the trauma repeated. And Even in 19th century, some 600,000 Jews were massacred in Ukraine. And we all know about Holocaust. That's another example. And we have plenty of examples. According to Engels, history is among the most cruel of all goddesses. It runs its chariot in the dead body of all of us. That is cruelty of history. And we have the experience of Genghis Khan, Timur-Land, who made minaret out of beheaded people, out of their heads. In Isfahan, for example, 800 heads were, he made a huge edifice out of that and sat on the top of that. And some people believe that the accent of people in Isfahan looks like mourning because of that sad experience of collective trauma. We have also experience of genocide under Ottoman Empire, 1915 to 22. And when Hitler was told about that, why you be a little bit lenient against 4 groups, gypsies, communists, homosexuals, and Jewish people, said, who after all remembers the Armenian people? Still, after many generations, Armenians suffer. Trauma, collective trauma, has the capacity of transmitting through generations. And we have Holocaust. And also, you marvelously, Ali, mentioned about experience of Iranian Holocaust. And I almost cried. So, this is examples of collective trauma. And one thing, you know, that is, unfortunately, in a way, all of us suffer from some kind of collective trauma because of war. According to one study, since the beginning of human history, more than 3,300 major wars have been waged. For the last 120 years, we have had 200 wars. And right now, there are 40 wars going on here and there. And let me tell you the nature of modern warfare. In 1900, 10% of casualty used to go to civilian people, 90% to military personnel. During the Second War, it became 50-50. And today, 90% of casualties go to civilian population and 10% to military personnel. In a nutshell, all wars are wars against civilians, especially women and children. And here, war makes the whole population traumatized, and that is collective trauma. Let me share some impacts of collective trauma. The first impact, collective trauma could come due to earthquake or tsunami, and we have had so many examples like that. But that is natural disasters, not man-made cruelty. Let me talk about some impacts. The first impact is shock. You don't know what happened to you. You are confused. You don't believe it. And you have lost yourself totally. That is why in almost all traumas, collective instances of collective traumas, so people many years after, they start criticizing themselves that we could have handled that trauma in a better way. So, because initially you are shocked, initially you are confused, everybody is confused, the survivors and also the community. That is why preparedness is very, very important. So, an understanding of the collective trauma. The second thing that happens, collapse of the community link. So under genocide, for example, in Rwanda, I was in Rwanda in 1996, I stayed there for 3 weeks. Even 2 years later, the challenge was how to bring community together, because people don't trust one another, and community life is gone. And deterioration of values. There are so many values, traditions that bind people together in this instance of massacre or genocide or war. They lose those values. And those values are not replaced by new values. What to do? You are in a state of uncertainty. You don't know who you are. You have lost yourself. And it's very dangerous, because it's possible to build, destroy all the infrastructure destroyed by war. But it's not possible to rebuild those values that are gone forever. One Nigerian writer said, center cannot support. Everything is getting disintegrated. And a priest, a Jesuit priest who was murdered in El Salvador, Ignatius Martin Barrow said, war makes the whole society polarization of society. That is another impact of collective trauma. Culture of fear and mass intimidation. So it is not only victimizers who try to spread culture of intimidation to rule and to continue with occupation or with their atrocities. Also, victims feel intimidated. And I give you some examples. For example, under Duvalier in Haiti, they erected his statue everywhere with 2 eyes looking at everywhere and turning to intimidate people that obey him. So otherwise you will be in trouble. And you mentioned earlier about torture. One of the aims of torture is intimidation. Torture is going on, and don't raise your voice. Another byproduct of collective trauma is silence. Today, under many tyrannical regimes in the world, you have culture of silence. So in countries like Jordan, in countries like Saudi Arabia, in many Middle Eastern and Muslim countries, and in my country of origin, Iran also. That is, the silence helps tyrants to continue their rule. Culture of hate, and again, unfortunately, not only by victims, also by victimizers both. I give you one example that is, so some people may not like it, but in Palestine, for example, Israeli government and fanatical Jews hate Palestinians. And unfortunately, Palestinians also hate Jewish people. It is at a mass level. It is not just coming from the government. And culture of hate is ruling, and it should definitely be replaced by culture of law. But it's a great challenge. Another impact of collective trauma comes to children. Children don't know what is happening. They just, even the way they play with some kind of dolls who look like weapons. And that they carry this trauma up to their adulthood. And even when the situation changes, they have that trauma. And if they want to make a society suffers from a kind of hidden subconscious collective trauma. And that is also horrible. Another issue is under the condition of war and genocide, parents lose their authority to support children. And as culture of violence also develops, because violence has the last say, and everything is resolved by violence, and even victimizers, they resort to some kind of violence, and sometimes terrorism, because we have two types of terrorism today, state terrorism and non-state terrorism. They nourish each other, and they are two sides of the same coins, although non-state terrorism is defensive and state terrorism is offensive, but they belong to the same category. And unfortunately, terrorism also is a byproduct of the atmosphere of collective trauma and violence. Now I come to healing. Is there what to do when there is collective trauma? First, I want to criticize Western approach to trauma. So they say, okay, there are some clinical methods to heal them. No. Clinical methods? Western caregivers, they are not aware of culture of oppressed people. They don't know. I am a doctor. You are a patient. You should listen to me. Nothing else. It is medicalization of human life. Extremely dangerous. And what if you make a mistake, doctor? What about the discipline if there is something wrong with the whole discipline? Alexander Herzen, a 19th century socialist, said, you are not doctors, you are disease itself. And I remember after 9/11, one of my clients from Afghanistan went to a physical practitioner, his own family doctor, sharing his problem. And the doctor said, are you from Afghanistan? Yes, sir. Are you a terrorist? Horrible. And my client immediately left the clinic, came to us. It took us 10 days. We mobilized the whole center, our psychiatrist, psychologist, trauma counselor. Then gradually he came back to from his traumatized condition. What to do when this kind of approach is wrong? We have holistic approach. Those who are victims of torture, those who are victims of war, genocide, and crimes against humanity, more than some pills that most of the time don't help, they need other types of support. They need, first, to establish themselves. They need settlement and resettlement support. They need housing, they need job, they need language training. And that is not possible by a medical practitioner to do that. Secondly, they feel terribly lonely. I call it loneliness of exile. Believe me, when a client comes to me, I ask for, give me a phone number of a friend, a relative. If I can't reach you, I reach that person. 75% of them, they don't have any phone number. They suffer from loneliness of exile. We match them with befrienders here. They need those types of support, holistic support, based on community. Community is very, very important. And no, I come to the community because one reaction to collective trauma is solidarity in the community and rehabilitation by the community itself. I give you one example in Ireland. The war was going on for 30 years, and the stats of referring to mental health hospitals was constant, the same. What does it mean? Despite escalation of war, same people went to psychiatric hospital. It means that community had some mechanism to heal its member. Under atmosphere of collective trauma, community support and community solidarity are extremely important. And then when we come to second or third generations, one thing is important is recognition. You need recognition. So people don't deny my experience, what I went through, what my people went through. I told you about Armenians, Assyrians, Jewish people that still are looking for recognition. And also, I suffer, as Ali mentioned, that there is no recognition for what happened to our people. Still, there is no recognition. And it's very sad. So, and global recognition. I tell you, during the 2004 tsunami in South Asia, we had global security. Of course, it didn't cure the pain, but it was extremely helpful to survivors when the whole world feels empathy with you, feels solidarity with you. And then I come to impunity, addressing impunity. Again, when during transitional justice, when war is over, genocide is over, there is a need to bring perpetrators to justice. I told you I went to Rwanda in 1996. People were speaking of three things. The first one, justice. Second, reconciliation. Third, reconstruction. Justice is important. There is a kind of slogan among my Iranian. So we don't forget, we don't forgive. I agree with the first part, but I don't agree with the second part. Because under certain conditions, there should be forgiveness. When truth are known, when perpetrators apologize, when victims and survivors accept, there should be some kind of forgiveness. Otherwise, so there is no continuation of a compassionate life. But anyway, truth should come to the fore, and apology should happen, and perpetrators should be punished. But of course, not in the same way as they perpetrated atrocities against us. We are not them. We are different. And finally, under the atmosphere of collective trauma, when trauma and atrocities or genocide, and as you see in Iran, all types of oppression and repression and suppression are going on, what to do? Is there any treatment? Is there anything to relieve? I say yes. Continue with your struggle. I want to share with you a historical example. During Algerian war, there was a psychiatrist called Franz Fanon. He was head of a psychiatric hospital. One day, he submitted his resignation, and he said, if the aim of psychology is helping human person to come out of trauma, but under the colonial war, Arabs are going through trauma on a daily basis, and trauma reproduces itself. Psychiatry cannot help. He resigned and he joined the ranks of revolutionaries. And sometimes collective trauma. So collective trauma doesn't mean the end of life. It's very sad, is very upsetting, is horrible, but it could bring solidarity among people, as it is happening in occupied territory of Palestine to do. They have mass funeral, they have mass collaboration, and in that way, they don't remove collective trauma, but they alleviate collective trauma. Very important, very, very important if people go with the same feeling of fortitude. Fortitude means capacity to face danger, to face risk, and capacity to stand firm and resist. In my view, collective fortitude only comes when there is collective solidarity and cohesion among people. Let's cherish this today. And there are so many things that could lead to global trauma. For example, environmental disaster. For example, war. So the lots of armaments and nuclear ammunition are there in the arsenals of superpowers that could explode the planet Earth maybe 1,000 times. We are living in this age of fear. What to do? We should prepare ourselves, and we should consolidate our solidarity and also consolidate our fortitude for the future that comes. And I don't think is not better than the past, but all we need to just rally together, stay together, work together, and struggle together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Zzat.